Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
How are you?
I'm doing so great this week. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. Mandy, I'm super excited for what we're talking about today.
I am as well. So we recently got to chat with Patia and Hannah from The Knife, which if you have not heard that yet, it's an amazing true crime podcast, and we think our listeners are really going to love them.
And so we decided to do a little crossover, and what we came up with is this. We each brought a story to the table and putting the full episode on our feed, and they're putting it on theirs as well.
Yeah, so you'll hear our story first in our episode, and then Patia and Hannah will take it from there. You can find more info about their podcast, The Knife, in our show notes. And after you listen, be sure to follow and subscribe to their show so that you don't miss an episode.
So this week's story feels a little like a movie. Like if we told you this was a Netflix plotline, you'd probably believe us, but you'd still be like, well, maybe not. I'm not sure. So we're talking about this lanky teenager from a small island town who escapes from a halfway house and goes on the run. But not just any run. This kid steals cars, he breaks into homes, he hacks computers, he flies actual airplanes that he taught himself how to fly, and he learned all of this on YouTube, and he does it all, this part is unfortunate, barefoot. Have you guys?
Melissa
I hate that part of the story. I don't care how good his feet are, anybody's feet, I don't want to see them. But have you guys heard of Colton Harris-Moore, the Barefoot Bandit?
I have not.
Oh, this is such a treat. I'm so excited to be bringing this to you. What a big day for us. So Colton Harris-Moore, he is 6'5", 200 pounds by the time he reaches his full internet legend status. So he is someone that lives in the woods. He's slipped through police traps. He's somehow captured the imagination of thousands of people who were rooting for him online. Think like Luigi, that we just had going through the news, like
Mangione.
Yes, like that kind of a hype though, and people following his story, like when Facebook was still kind of early days and stuff. But as wild and as meme-worthy as his case is, it's also sad and messy because he wasn't some kind of anti-hero or anything. He was just a teenager who has been failed by really every system in his life.
Yeah, so Colton was born in 1991, and he grew up in Camano Island, Washington. So this is a very tight-knit island with only about 1,500 residents. So you're thinking like it's in Washington, woodsy, quiet. This is the kind of place that you really want to escape to or get away to, not the kind of place that you're usually running away from. But as we said, Colton didn't really have the peaceful small-town life that, you would expect a child growing up in this area to have. His dad left when he was just around 2 or 3 years old and was in and out of his life until he finally disappeared for good. And his mom struggled with addiction and mental health issues. She reportedly would let Colton just kind of come and go as he pleased. And that was even during the height of his crime spree. She was still allowing him, free access to her home.
Yeah, she would straight up be like, my son was hungry and he came over and what do you want me to do, not feed them? When the police are like, you're aiding and abetting, a criminal. She's like, right. My son's hungry. I'm going to feed him. So she was not to be messed with in this entire story.
No. So by the time Colton was 7, he had already been arrested, 7 years old, which is heartbreaking and also like, what happened, right? I'm sure that's probably what everyone's thinking. What would a 7-year-old possibly do? Well, he didn't hurt anyone, but he would sneak into vacation homes, literally looking for food and shelter, though. So, like, you have this little kid that's breaking and entering into vacation homes because he's hungry and he wants a place to rest. So his behavior, though, did escalate over time, not necessarily because he was a bad person, but literally it was a means of survival for him. And eventually he did end up in a juvenile detention center and then a halfway house. And that's where things really took a sharp turn for him.
So it was just days before his 17th birthday that Colton escaped the halfway house. Not in like a chaotic middle of the night, running through in slow motion kind of thing, but more like a very carefully planned out route through the woods that he knew all of the woods. Like he literally grew up there and in there. He was someone who lived in the woods a lot. And from there, he launched one of the most bizarre and infamous 2-year crime sprees we have ever seen. He knows the woods, like I was saying, better than anyone. He would build a camp. He would stash his supplies. He'd even set out little hideouts near the houses that he was targeting. And police would randomly stumble into his camps and think they're close to getting him. But within hours, he realizes they've seen it and he's off to a new place. One thing I read was during this time he was in the woods, he was a mile away from his mom. He was in a very small area, and they could not catch this kid at all. But it went further, not just breaking in, stealing food and stuff. Locals start noticing strange things, like their credit cards are being used online to buy things like bear spray or computer hacking software or GPS tools and, of course, porn. He wasn't just stealing random things. He was literally studying, researching, and upgrading his gear. In one particularly bold move, he broke into a police station, disabled their alarm system, and was able to make out with a few things. And another time, he broke into a fire station. Here's where I say he's kind of pretty smart. And stole an infrared camera. That way, he could scan houses to make sure no one was in the house before he would break in. That way, he's just going in, getting what he needs, and he's leaving.
Smart for thinking of having thermal imaging before you break into someone's home just to make sure they're not there. I appreciate that effort very much for his safety and the homeowner as well. But also not really smart to get one from a fire station.
He did it just fine.
I can only imagine how law enforcement felt. He's breaking into our facilities and we cannot catch him.
It's got to be embarrassing.
But to use our equipment against us, basically, to use, it's all just completely bizarre to even think that a teenager was responsible for this whole thing.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
So you had mentioned okay, so he's using credit cards. I'm guessing that's because he's breaking into people's homes and maybe taking their wallet or something. And you had mentioned that he was also buying porn. Did he have what was his connectivity as far as did he have internet access? Did he have a phone?
He had a laptop.
Okay.
I don't remember if he had a phone, but he did have a laptop. As the story goes on, he literally will post pictures of himself on Facebook laying in the woods, and everyone's trying to figure out where he is.
He is.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll hear more about the credit card thing in a minute. It's probably my favorite part of the story.
So eventually, by the time he was, in his teen years, he now has found a partner in crime for some of his crime adventures. And this was a friend of his named Harley. So the two of them started breaking into vacation homes together. And Harley later said that he was mostly just in it for the cash, but Colton was always looking for other things, as Melissa was saying, laptops, credit cards, anything, any tool or anything that he could get his hands on that might help him stay one step ahead of the authorities. They would even find keys to cars, and they would go take these cars on joyride. So Grand Theft Auto now. They're just all the crimes stacking up. But in a weird twist of conscience, or maybe chaos, they would sometimes return the car full of gas, cleaned, and park it back in.
Can you imagine coming home and thinking, someone's messed with my car, but I have a full tank of gas, and they cleaned it? I don't know that I would call the police. I'd be like, this was the car angels.
The car cleaning fairy visited me.
I feel like if I'm one of these owners of a vacation home, this is the lure of the island, and I want him to break in.
Right.
I want to be next.
Right.
Yeah.
No kidding. So it was around this time that residents started calling Colton Teen Houdini, which I feel like is very apt considering that they really could not find him. And he would appear and disappear and just continue to confuse law enforcement every step of the way. So as word spread about this Barefoot Bandit teen genius that was just slipping through the cracks and, was not able to be captured, that was how kind of this legend was born. And there were really early YouTube videos about it. Facebook fan groups started popping up. There were even people making and selling T-shirts with his name or, Barefoot Bandit, some funny, it was just a big joke, but it really wasn't a joke. So that's where it's very ironic.
So the barefoot thing, though, he was doing this all the time in the woods, everywhere. I don't know that it was necessarily he didn't like shoes or he liked his feet or he had a thing with feet. I don't know. But it was very obvious everywhere he went because they would see his footprints. One time he even pours, I think, flour somewhere on the ground and walks through it so they could see it. He was leaving his calling card everywhere. And unfortunately, his calling card is feet.
I can't.
Yuck. I know it's too much.
After all of the links that he went to.
I know. But the thing with him is he really does think he's smarter than everyone. And in some ways, he is smarter than a lot of people. He has like a will, a determination. Like he's doing this for himself, and he hasn't had a lot, even education. He really hasn't had a whole lot.
Not hurting anyone.
Well,
that's the other part about this.
Yeah.
Yes and no. There's no victims, but there kind of are if you think about it. If somebody broke into my house, and just like that sense of security, you lose that sense of security. So in that sense, like...
Oh, well, I absolutely...
Yeah.
I mean, he's not physically like going out and looking for people to like assault or anything. So I feel like, of course, this is still wrong and these are still crimes. Absolutely. I just mean he's not out...
He's not physically harming people.
Right.
Totally.
He's not out there like looking to like actually hurt people and,
unless you have
in a
flour,
physical way.
Then he's going to take it from you.
Unless his feet get all over your stuff.
Yeah. Ugh. Gross. Burn it down. So at one point, police find one of his recent camps, and they spotted something unusual. They found his dog. And so he very much loved this dog. The police decide, we're going to take the dog in, and they hoped that it would lure Colton in. And it did, sort of. Instead of turning himself in, though, would you like to guess what happened? Anyone?
He stole the dog.
Thank you. He broke in, stole the dog.
I mean, it was his dog. I don't know if it counts as stealing.
But we don't know the original place that he got this dog from, to be honest. So he stole someone's dog out of there. This was kind of funny to me. They called his mom, who he had like a relationship with, but it was obviously very rocky. She was like, let me get his dog. And they were like, absolutely not. This dog is part of evidence. She's like, what? It's not evidence. But come on, she would have been like, hey, Colton, here's some eggs and here's your dog. She was not going to stop him or, not give him his dog. So, and then there are the planes. Colton was obsessed with aviation. He could actually identify aircrafts by the sound of their engines as they went over him. He would sit by the airfields and watch them take off and land. He would steal credit cards and use them to buy flight manuals online. And if you're like, wait a minute, why is he using credit cards? How is this stuff getting to him? He doesn't have an address, right?
Right.
Good question. One time he stole a credit card from a restaurant, got the tracking number, had it sent to the restaurant. When he saw that the tracking number said delivered, he broke in and got the book and got back out. So... he needed the internet as part of this, for sure. He taught himself everything. As I said, he has this manual, these books, he's reading them. He's watching thousands of hours on YouTube, which I can't remember how much was even on YouTube at the time. He's doing everything he can to learn about flying, literally anything to become a pilot. He wasn't really interested in becoming a pilot at some point in his life. He was literally studying for the moment he could try it for real.
Which is a great great attitude to have towards flying an airplane.
I mean, really, why do it later when you could do it now? Not great.
Right. And lucky for Colton, he didn't have to wait very long. The opportunity came a lot sooner than he or anyone ever expected. In the midst of all these news reports about this kid, he stole his first airplane and promptly crashed it, but somehow
YouTube flight
he
school
did survive, and he got away. He slipped away. The authorities actually didn't even suspect Colton was behind this plane theft and crashing because literally, why would you think that this kid, Barefoot Bandit, you wouldn't put that together and think, well, maybe he now has stolen an airplane. They actually assumed that the plane was stolen and crashed by a drug runner who crashed the plane and took off. But one little plane crash, though, was not going to stop our friend Colton. He just really kept right going. From that point, he broke into 6 different airports just trying to find the right plane. I don't know how he was like eeny, meeny, miny, mowing this or something.
I mean,
I don't know how he was choosing.
He knew how to fly
I guess,
and he was like looking for a very specific one. I guess he didn't learn to fly a lot of them, so it should have been millions of hours on YouTube, and maybe he could have just had his pick of the litter.
I wonder if it's like, when you're learning how to drive a car or even when you're purchasing a new vehicle. Like, I know that I look at driving smaller car differently than driving like a big thing. Sometimes I get freaked out if I think about like, could I drive a semi-truck? Like, I couldn't do that. Maybe it was the same with the plane. Maybe he was like, I can't take a passenger. I can't take a 737, right? Like, I can't drive. He at least knew that much. He had to find like a small enough plane that he thought he could handle. right?
Know your limits, you know?
Yeah, I'm imagining these are like
You have to know
small
your limits.
planes, not
They're like little
commercial.
Cessnas and stuff.
Yeah,
But wouldn't it be great if he
Right.
did?
pretty wild.
Which there's so many of those little planes up there getting to the islands.
Right, exactly. So he really could just get
That's
them
true. So over the course of this spree, he did find a few different airplanes that suited his fancy. He actually stole several and crashed at least 4 of them, but somehow walked away unscathed every single time. Either he's like got 9 lives or he's just not flying very high and is a very lucky person. But by now, the internet was bought in. Everybody was in on this story. Everybody wanted to know more. He had thousands of Facebook friends. And as Melissa was saying, he's loving it. He loves the attention. He's posting pictures of himself just laying in the woods, just taunting the police and the authorities that are looking for him, enjoying the fact that people are literally writing songs about him. They're using his mugshot and putting it on merch. They're calling him a modern day Robin Hood. At one point, a veterinary clinic employee in Raymond, Washington found a $100 bill and a handwritten note that read, "I had some extra cash. Please use it for the animals." And it was signed Colton Harris-Moore, a.k.a. the Barefoot Bandit. I don't know. He did seem like he was an animal person, so maybe it was him. But, sometimes I'm like, people do weird
He
things.
had some extra cash.
Strangers do weird
No,
things.
buddy, you stole that.
You
Yeah.
need the cash.
It is very Robin Hood, I guess, to have done that.
Yeah.
It is.
So some people are, of course, rooting for him, but others are exhausted, especially the local police department. I can't imagine having to stand up there and say, we still can't find him. And they're like, his feet are on the windows. We still don't know where he is. Like, that has to get old really quick. But of course, Colton's actions weren't completely harmless. He did leave people afraid in their own homes, as I was saying before. He broke into government vehicles. He stole guns. Law enforcement across multiple states spent countless hours and resources trying to find him. And he would just keep moving. He'd steal a car, drive it until it ran out of gas, and then ditch it and find another one. He actually started hopping islands by boat, avoiding capture again and again. Eventually, though, he has an idea. He wants to get to the Bahamas. So he is going to drive across the U.S., stealing cars, abandoning them as he, runs out of gas, and then grabbing a new one. But finally, in July of 2010, it all comes crashing down. Literally. Colton stole one plane. This one is in Indiana, and flew it all the way down to the Bahamas, which right there, how? I wouldn't even know if I was up or down if I was flying a plane.
I want to know, how come no air traffic control picked
Yes.
this up and was like, why is this random plane not flying at all correctly, going all the way from Washington to the Bahamas?
Indiana. It's much better. It's just Indiana.
Still.
It's also like you hear that
Still.
once you become a parent, you never sleep through the night again because you just worry about
Totally.
your kids. I mean, this mom is operating on another planet.
Absolutely.
Has to be.
Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. So this time his flight, believe it or not, he crash lands once again. These are smaller planes. It's got to be him running out of gas. I know at least a few times, and like pretty low to the ground. But still, Mandy knows I would die if I just fell out of a plane. All my bones would break. I would be a medical emergency. Like, I can barely survive the day. And he's just getting out of crashes over and over again. But of course, he's not done. He gets to the Bahamas. He's crashed. Now he's going to get a boat. So he takes a boat and he leads the Bahamian authorities on a high-speed water chase before they finally catch up to him and are like, if you try to drive off, we're going to shoot your boat. And so when he tries to do that, they shoot up his boat. He's alive. He's fine. But he was scared, obviously, at that point, and police were finally able to capture him. And just like that, the Barefoot Bandit was grounded. So listen, I'm not proud of this, but I've officially started sneaking my Boll and Branch waffle blanket off of my son's bed after he falls asleep. I told myself I was just letting him borrow it, but that blanket is now in full custody limbo, and it's coming with me. There's just something about the way it feels. It's like cozying up inside a hug that you forgot you needed, or in my case, that I don't really want. But it's like a blanket. It's a blanket that gives you the hug. That's different than a people hug. But also, the signature sheets from Boll and Branch are exactly the same. They're buttery soft, right out of the package, and somehow they even get softer with every wash. I don't know the science behind that, but I totally support it. I used to toss and turn at night, thinking about tomorrow's to-do list or wondering if I signed the permission slip, but slipping into Boll & Branch sheets actually helps my brain shut off. They're made with the finest 100% organic cotton, free from toxins, and crafted by expert artisans who are paid fairly, which to me makes it all even better. Plus, they come with a 30-night worry-free guarantee so you can try them out risk-free. Get the best savings of the season during Boll & Branch's annual summer event. Get 20% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/moms. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/moms to save 20% and unlock free shipping. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. Okay, so you know that moment when you're digging through your closet, swearing you have nothing to wear, even though you're barely able to shut the closet door closed? Yeah, that was me last week. And then I remembered my Quince silk top. I've had it for 2 years and it still looks brand new, still fits like a dream, and somehow is still current. I can wear it with everything from jeans to skirts and even shorts with little platform shoes. And that's the thing about Quince. Anything I've ever bought from them holds up in quality and style. It's like your future favorite outfit, just quietly waiting for you to notice it. Now that summer's in full swing, I'm definitely feeling the urge to refresh my closet, but I'm not about to waste money on trendy pieces that only work for one season. And that's why I love Quince. They've got 100% European linen tops starting at $30, washable silk shirts and dresses, soft cotton sweaters. Everything feels so luxurious, but still totally wearable. And here's the kicker. It's all half the cost of similar brands. They actually work directly with top artisans and skip the middlemen, so you get the good stuff without the markup. And everything's made in factories that are ethical and responsible, so you can feel good while you look good. Give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/moms for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/moms to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/moms.
Wow.
Grounded. You're grounded.
He needed to be grounded a few more times.
He did.
Starting at 7.
He did. The Bahamian authorities extradited him back to the U.S., and once he was back in the U.S., he faced over 30 charges. They ranged from everything, including burglary, to aircraft theft, which apparently is its own separate crime. I didn't know that. But he was facing multiple years of incarceration, and that is, of course, unless he could get himself a great defense attorney. And you bet he did. So you might know this guy. His name is John Henry Brown, and it is the same John Henry Brown who once defended Ted Bundy. So in 2012, Colton pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, and he was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. He went on to serve his time really without any incident, surprisingly, because you would think that the Barefoot Bandit would Barefoot Bandit his way right out of prison as his, last act of just complete insanity.
He thought about it.
But
absolutely.
He definitely thought about it. But after his release, his legitimate release in 2016, Colton reportedly went to a halfway house and worked in construction and expressed interest in becoming an aviation mechanic, which definitely makes sense. Might be a great career path for him. He definitely was persistent, and he had at least a little bit of knowledge already going into it. So maybe that would be a good thing for him. But now that the media circus has moved on, his story, of course, lingers as one of the weirdest true crime rabbit holes that we've ever been down. We actually, years ago, talked about this story for our Patreon listeners. It's been such a long time ago. They did a documentary about this.
It's on Amazon Prime. It's not great, but there's 48 hours.
I thought it was
it's
great.
A weirdly animated thing. In parts, so many feet. One time he's just sitting in the plane. I rewatched it, and just his foot is up there in the most odd way you could ever put your foot. But I'm like, we get it. He's barefoot. They just couldn't stop.
I have a very hard time with the barefoot thing. I gotta be honest.
It's too much.
Teenage boy, bare feet.
Okay, yeah. You really
it's
brought
too
it
much.
That is way too much. But of course, we know Colton wasn't actually violent unless you count the aggressiveness he portrayed his feet. The amount of times I've seen this kid's feet is upsetting and unsettling. But of course, it wasn't exactly harmless. He was failed by all the adults in his life, really, by the system and by the structures that were supposed to protect him. And he learned to survive on his own. And somewhere along the way, survival turns into a spectacle. And thanks to internet hype and media fascination, that spectacle turns into legend, really. But behind all the headlines and memes is a boy who really never had a fair shot. Of course, there's a ripple effect of his actions, and it stretches far. It's in people's homes, it's in their communities, and in the lives of people who are still dealing with the consequences. I will say from that documentary, this is kind of peeling back what I just said, but there's a lady who, I guess Colton had ran through her yard, and she took the footprints, made like casings, and tried to sell them on eBay. And I want to know if she sold them. But she was like standing up in the documentary with 2 feet. And I was like, lady, this is too far. We've gone way too far. So yeah, so that's really the story of Colton and his Barefoot Bandit badness, I guess.
Wow, what a great story. And I'm from Washington State and I'd never heard of it.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know this one in real time, I will say. I'm normally like pretty good on those things. I didn't know this one in real time, but I've been fascinated by it ever since.
Wow.
It's so interesting. And, you're right. Like, he's breaking into people's home. He is causing some level of damage and fear, but you can really also feel for him. Like, he was this kid that really never fit into society and maybe didn't really have a chance. So then he was like, I'm just going to make my own way and do whatever I want, and was clearly, is clearly intelligent in some way. And
he is resourceful. You cannot say that he's not resourceful. He paid attention and he was always one step ahead. Obviously, he knew what he was doing. I mean, and I genuinely don't believe that he was trying to like harm or scare anyone, for sure. I think it was just him just trying to take care of himself and to get by, for sure.
It's like, I don't know what the job is, but there's a very specific job out there for Colton.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you even imagine? And when you were saying, Mandy, earlier about the planes being stolen and how that's like a federal offense or whatever, it's so funny because there is somebody in the FBI whose job is like plane recovery or something. We always run into that. It'll be like some FBI agent in charge of art theft. I'm like, really? But I mean, I guess it does make sense. So there's a job for Colton and there's a job for everyone, I guess.
All right. So the story that we have today is the story of Sally Challen. I'm going to start the story in 2010. Sally, whose real name is Georgina, by the way, but she goes by Sally, and Richard Challen had been married for 31 years. They had 2 sons who were both grown, both in their 20s. In 2010, Sally was 56 years old and Richard was 61. They lived in Surrey, England, which is southwest of London. And about a year prior, in 2009, Sally had actually moved out of their family home. Their youngest son, David, was living with Sally, and their oldest son was living on his own. So Richard was the only one living in the house that they, had lived in for years and raised their sons in. And the reason for this was that they were going to get divorced, but they actually they were actually in the midst of reconciling. So on the morning of August 10th, 2010, Sally went over to their family home where Richard was living with the idea that they were going to spend the day cleaning out the garage, getting ready to sell the house. And one of the ideas they had was they were going to use some of this money from the house sale to go on a trip to Australia together. But before they started cleaning out the house, they wanted to make breakfast. So Sally actually went to the store to go buy bacon and eggs to make breakfast. She would later say that she had the suspicion that Richard told her to go to the store to buy these ingredients to try to get her out of the house, and she was suspicious about this. So when she got back, she checked his phone, and it showed a phone call between Richard and this woman, Susan Wilkie. This was a person that Sally was already suspicious of, that she had Googled the day before. And it turns out Richard had met this woman, Susan Wilkie, on a social networking website called Dinner Dates. And when Sally asked Richard about this, he responded with, "Don't question me." So Sally made breakfast. Richard sat down at the table to eat this breakfast. And when he did, Sally took a hammer from her purse and hit him over the head more than 20 times until he was almost dead. She then stuffed a tea towel into his mouth to make sure he was dead. she wrapped his body in some old curtains and wrote a note and left the note on his body that read, "I love you, Sally." And then she left. She went back to the house where she was living. The next morning, she got up. She drove her 23-year-old son, David, to work. And then she left Surrey and drove 75 miles south to Beachy Head in East Sussex, England, which is on the southern coast and has these massive cliffs that overlook the ocean. It's beautiful from pictures I looked at online, but sadly, it's also a very common place for people to go and end their life by jumping off the cliffs. And actually, in 2010, the Wall Street Journal listed it as among the top 3 most common suicide spots in the world. And if you go there, there are signs with the phone number to the Samaritans, which is a charity aimed at providing emotional support to people, and they're available 24/7. And the local community and the police are also aware of this, so they're sort of on the lookout for people that might be trying to do this. Reportedly, Sally called her cousin and confessed to killing Richard and said she planned to jump from the cliffs. But the police were called, and it took 3 hours of them talking to her to convince her to come away from the ledge. And she was taken into custody and charged with the murder of Richard Challen. The police discovered his body around 1 p.m. on Sunday, which was the next day, and a post-mortem exam that was conducted determined his cause of death to be severe blunt trauma to the head.
So Sally immediately admits to having killed Richard, and so she's taken into custody at that point, and this is August of 2010. And so during her time in custody, she is assessed by 2 different psychologists, forensic psychologists. And the first one of those, we'll get into her trial, but he said that he did not conclude that Sally had been suffering from any mental disorders or personality disorders. Then a second forensic psychologist also assessed Sally, and his conclusion was different. He said that he believed she was suffering from a depressive disorder. He also noted that Sally told him about sexual and physical abuse by Richard that included that Richard would rape her as a form of punishment, and that she hoped that when he did this, it would sort of make him happy and make him love her. And she's a woman in distress. So this trial takes place in June of 2011, and the trial takes place over 7 days. And during her trial, Sally is portrayed by the Crown as constantly checking Richard's phone and email, being jealous and possessive, and having said at one point, "If I can't have him, then no one can." And the jury was also told that Sally had been stalking Richard online, spying on him, listening to his voicemails. It was really a picture of a scorned lover, a woman who refused to move on from her failed marriage. And Sally's defense relied partially on something called diminished responsibility, which means, yes, she's saying that she killed him, but her responsibility for killing him cannot be murder because she was experiencing things in the marriage that were taking away her capacity to think clearly. So Sally's defense during her trial is saying, is introducing this concept of diminished responsibility. They're basically asserting that although Sally broke the law by killing Richard, her mental capacity was impaired, and this ought to protect her from full criminal responsibility. And the goal here is that Sally doesn't end up with a murder conviction, but instead manslaughter, because manslaughter carries a much lighter sentence, and they felt it was appropriate given what she experienced during her marriage to Richard. Unfortunately, Sally is convicted by a unanimous jury in June 2011 after only 11 hours, and they convict her of murder. So she appeals her conviction, but it was upheld. The only thing that comes her way is that her sentence is reduced from a minimum of 22 years to a minimum of 19 years served. And the entire time that this is going on, ever since Sally is charged at all, she has the support of her family and other people who are standing in solidarity with Sally as a victim of domestic abuse. But, we've learned so much about domestic abuse since 2010 and have so much more language around what that can really mean. And so as her legal team is preparing for another appeal, this whole other picture of Sally's marriage begins to emerge.
Back to school season is here, which means I'm once again managing a calendar that looks like a color-coded game of Tetris, and that's on a good day. But honestly, Skylight Calendar might be the best thing invented since dry shampoo on picture day. It's this smart, all-in-one touchscreen calendar that puts everyone's chaos into one beautiful color-coded screen. I've got school schedules, after-school activities, dentist appointments, and those random spirit days all actually visible, which means fewer surprises and way less mental load. It syncs with Google, Apple, Outlook, even your email, and has customizable daily, weekly, or monthly views. The task feature is genius for helping kids stay on top of routines like brushing teeth or getting their homework done without me having to repeat myself 1,100 times. And I love that I can also assign each family member a color so no one's asking, wait, what time's practice again? Everything is right there. And with the Skylight app, I can update the schedule on the go instead of mentally juggling it while cooking dinner. Back to school prep isn't just about the new backpacks, it's about setting up systems that actually make life easier. And this one seriously delivers. Plus, if you're not 100% thrilled with your Skylight calendar in the first 4 months, you can return it for a full refund. No questions asked. Right now, Skylight is offering our listeners $30 off their 15-inch calendars by going to skylightcal.com/moms. Go to skylightcal.com/moms for $30 off your 15-inch calendar. That is skylightcal.com/moms.
Through interviews with her attorney, she starts to sort of open up, and we learn about what was actually going on inside their marriage. And, it goes all the way back to the beginning. And actually, Sally was only 15 years old when they first met, and Richard was 22. So she was still basically a child.
A baby, yeah.
Yeah. And there's accounts that, he was controlling pretty much right off the bat. He would control how she acted and wanted to control sort of who she talked to. And she was still in school, but she would stop by his apartment after school to clean and cook for him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. This was I think this was 1970 or something. So definitely different times, but still pretty alarming. And she got pregnant at 17 and ended up having a late-term abortion. Her older brothers brought her to have this done, and they then confronted Richard about this, as protective older brothers. And he supposedly said, shrugged it off and said, it could have been anybody's, baby.
Oh, gosh.
She also told her attorney that around this time, around age 17-ish, she confronted Richard because she found out that he was still sleeping with other women, and he dragged her down the stairs and threw her out of the apartment. She said that she was basically afraid from then till throughout their whole relationship of confronting him or pushing too hard in case he might react physically again like that. They ended up getting married. Her mom, Sally's mom, never liked him, didn't want them to get married, but people say she just really seemed to love him and always hoped that things would get better. He was really into cars. He would end up going on to start a car dealership and was very successful and made pretty good money. Their family home in Surrey in 2010 was estimated to be worth about £1 million. But, things didn't get better. Neighbors and friends would later say that he would often criticize her in public and in social settings, often commenting on her weight, that she did all the cooking, all the cleaning, took care of all the household stuff for them while he worked. So she was mostly a homemaker while the kids were little. But then when their youngest turned 13, she went and got an admin job. But then her husband, Richard, then required her to use her salary that she got from her job to pay for all of the household expenses. And he kind of kept his money for himself, and he would buy himself expensive cars and watches and go to Grand Prix events. Their youngest son, David, ever since his mom, was arrested and charged, has become an advocate for his mother's release. And he recently wrote a book called The Unthinkable, A Story of Control, Violence, and My Mother. And he talks a lot about what he observed of his parents growing up. He talked about his dad being this sort of like looming presence, and he watched as his dad would criticize his mother and come home and just criticize like the food that she cooked. He said that beyond that, his dad was very controlling of things like the television. Even when he was gone all day at work, he didn't want his mom or the boys watching TV because he said it would like diminish the life of the television.
Oh my gosh.
What? That's like taking, you always hear about like dad things, like they always want you to shut off the lights or they always want you to do this, but like not watching TV because you're scared that it's going to diminish the life of the TV is a new extreme of just dadism.
Totally. Yeah, totally different than like shut the door, don't air condition the whole neighborhood. Right?
I've heard that before.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was just like this like pattern of him being incredibly controlling. And he also controlled who Sally could be friends with. So one time she was like cooking in the kitchen. She was going to host a new friend that she'd met. And Richard didn't like this, so he just like threw the food across the room and said, well, I guess you can't have her over anymore. So there's definitely a pattern of him controlling her, isolating her, not wanting her to have friends. And then it sounds like he also was continually having affairs. Like that happened when they first met, and it sounds like it never really stopped. Certain times, Sally seemed to sort of be believing him, and other times she would question him. Their son, David, remembers when he was around 18 that he found out about some affairs his dad was having, and he even confronted his dad, and he said his dad just would never hear any of it. He wasn't receptive to anyone else's feedback, and over, anytime Sally would question him about something in their marriage, he would say the same thing. He would say, "Don't question me," which is interesting because that's like the last thing he said to her.
Yeah.
Before she killed him. In 2004, Richard and Sally, they went to Australia for a family's wedding. Richard's brother lived there with his sister-in-law. And even his family remembers seeing him interact with Sally and thinking that something was wrong. They didn't like the way he was treating her. Reportedly, he just only wanted to dance with all the young women at the wedding and wouldn't dance with Sally. Seemed to be like just to embarrass her or something. And Richard's sister-in-law spoke with her at that time and asked her how things were going. And she told her, if I left Richard, he would make my life hell. He was also charged with fraud in 2006. He owned a Ferrari, which cost him £92,000, and he had taken it to an F1 track in Belgium and wrecked it. And instead of reporting it, he shipped it back to Surrey and tried to make an insurance claim saying that it was hit by a truck. So
that's wild.
But they like figured out what was going on. He was charged with fraud. By 2009, Sally, her sons were older, and her son David specifically was very like supportive of her trying to get out of this marriage. She had finally left Richard. She had a small amount of family inheritance, which she used to buy a small house a few blocks away. And, she had finally done it. I mean, she was in her 50s at this point, and she had started dating him when she was 15 years old. So that's like, her whole life, basically.
Yeah.
And according to her friends and family, it just was really difficult. She couldn't really figure out how to do things without him. She was distraught, and soon she was hoping to get back together with him. Richard, on the other hand, I think used this as a way to manipulate her further and said that he would start to reconcile with her only under the circumstances that she agreed to get legally divorced. He wanted to give her £200,000, which would be far less than she would actually be entitled to. And she had to agree in writing that when they went out in public, she wouldn't talk with strangers and she would never interrupt him when he talked.
Ugh, I hate this guy.
Yeah. So she, agreed to it, but she was also suspicious that maybe he was just using this as an excuse to get legally divorced from her and keep most of their assets under the guise that they were going to reconcile. So that was sort of the situation leading up to that day in August of 2010. Her divorce attorney said that she had started and then stopped divorce proceedings 13 times. So there was a lot of just like indecision, and she had become obsessed with trying to find out if he was still cheating on her. It sounds like she was hoping that he had changed, but also wondering if he was just still doing the same thing.
Yeah. And so as Sally dives deeper into what was going on in her marriage with her legal team through this appeals process, it becomes clear the extent of the abuse that she was experiencing. And so in February 2019, which, she was convicted of murder back in June of 2011. She's been imprisoned this entire time. In February of 2019, she has a new legal team, and it consists of her solicitor, whose name is Harriet Wistrick, and she's actually the director of the Center for Women's Justice in the UK. Their mission is to hold the state accountable and challenge discrimination in the justice system around male violence against women and girls. She also has a woman named Claire Wade on her side, who is her trial attorney, and her practice really dives into murder, manslaughter, sexual offenses, and serious violence in the context of domestic homicide. So these two attorneys team up for Sally's defense, and they get her appeal seen by a 3-judge panel. And part of what comes out during that appeal is that there's this new term called coercive control that has come to light, and it really speaks to honing in on why Sally had that diminished responsibility that her defense said she had way back in 2011. And there's an American professor named Evan Stark who never assessed Sally personally, but can really speak to this term of coercive control. So he actually spoke during her appeal. And he is quoted as saying that coercive control was designed to subjugate and dominate, not merely to hurt. It achieves compliance by making victims afraid, depriving them of their rights, resources, and liberties, without which they cannot defend themselves, escape, refuse demands, or resist. It produces a hostage-like condition of entrapment. And at the time of her trial, he says it was not widely understood. So these judges, are going to determine if she's going to spend another 10 plus years in prison. And outside the courthouse, there's people holding signs, "Free Sally." Her sons are still there standing by her side. As Hannah mentioned, people who were on Richard's side of the family had even witnessed the abuse. After this appeals process, Sally wins. And the Crown that had initially convicted her wanted a retrial. They didn't get it. Her charge was reduced from murder to manslaughter, and so she was released because she had already served that time. Her manslaughter sentence would have been over 9 years, which she had already then served, and so she was released. And her son, who Hannah mentioned, said it was just an incredible experience to watch his mom walk out a free woman, and for people to understand that she wasn't this, cruel murderer. She was a woman who was experiencing coercive control and didn't know a way out. And I think also learning so much about her history, and this being her first relationship from when she's 15, it's like that, you don't know anything else. I can see why she filed so many times and then tried to reconcile. It's like your whole self-worth is tied up in this person because you don't know anything different.
She's only been an adult with him. That's her whole adult life. But it makes me think of, like, you do hear those relationships like 20-something, 15, and you have to wonder, like, how much of that is because, obviously there's laws against it, but how much of that is because they are just looking for someone to be able to control and manipulate, even if that doesn't seem like their intention. Like, there's really no reason a 22-year-old and a 15-year-old should be getting together. That's, again, a baby. Like, that's just a person starting their life. So
totally.
Unreal.
And it's unreal. And in the wake of her appeal, this term coercive control, they're realizing, okay, this applies to the case of these other women who are imprisoned on these murder charges. because we didn't have an understanding of domestic abuse and coercive control, like, at the time of their trial, like we do right now. And so there were successful appeals following Sally's successful appeal because of this sort of ability to convey to the judges what she was actually experiencing.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
That is such a wild story. Not one that I can personally relate to. I only can relate to the part of the story of meeting your spouse very young. I was 17 when I met my husband. We're actually about to celebrate our 20-year togetherness anniversary next week. But I relate to the feeling of just like not knowing anything different. Whenever you don't know, you don't know. Even if you know that you don't want to be in the situation you're in, it's really scary to think about leaving that situation and going off into something that you don't even know. At least the devil you know is better than the one you don't, or whatever the phrase is. You kind of know what you're into with what you've been used to. But if you leave and go off on your own, you don't know really what you're getting into. So you can see how that would be really scary for someone who got into that type of relationship when they were only 15 years old. It's just really
Oh,
heartbreaking.
especially like living under this threat. Like he's going to make her life hell if she divorces him. And it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Because my life was already so terrible with you.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's so scary.
How could it be worse?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening to our interview with Patia and Hannah. We appreciate them coming on and doing this little crossover with us, and we hope to do more things like this in the future.
Yeah, it was awesome. So excited we got to talk to them and hope to do something soon.
All right, guys, that was our story. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, new story.
Have a great week.
Bye.